Hello and welcome. I'd like to show you how I knitted a hat on the Sentro knitting machine. I have a couple of these circular knitting machines. This one here is one that Margaret Olander recommended. Very generic machine. And the other machine here is the Sentro that has 48 needles, and the one to the left has 40. The one with the 48, you can do a fairly good size adult hat if you hold it with the tension fairly loose. So here I'll show you how to thread the machine. It's fairly simple. You put a small length in the middle and then you go around each needle with the yarn, as I'm doing here. And the tension's fairly loose or actually fairly taut that you would want to use with this. And the first go round, I usually find that the machine wants to stick a little bit, but after a couple rounds it's pretty smooth. And you can see on the machine there's a counter, and it's very handy. The other machine, the 40 needle machine, doesn't have that counter. It's a mechanical counter. The yarn I'm using here is Caron Simply Soft. And for the beginning, I'm starting off with this hat, making the top part of the hat, which is in a variegated yarn. I find that this yarn works very well on the machine. If you use a bulkier yarn, it will be a little tougher for the machine, and you'll definitely notice it when you're, rotating the machine. So here I am. I've speeded it up quite a bit. It goes pretty fast, actually. And always have to feed the tension through. I use my hands. The machine comes with a little tension guide, but I find that it's fine to just put it loosely through my hand. And I try to keep the tension fairly loose, but not too loose. And so for this type of hat, I'll go about 45 in 45 rows, maybe 48, 50 rows, something like this. If I want a slouchy hat, I could go to 40 rows if you want a hat that's not as slouchy, and that's for the first part of the hat, the top part. And then I pick up a different color to do the brim, and that usually goes on for anywhere between 60 to 68, 70 rows, depending upon the slouch of the hat. And I generally do that in a color that's a solid color or a contrasting color. You're basically going to make a long tube using this machine. And what happens is, which I'll show you later, you'll take one end of that tube and pull it through the inside of the other end and sew them together. I bought this machine off of eBay. It took a little while to come, and I find it to be a very sturdy machine. It's worked out very well. And you can see the feet that I borrowed off the other machine. It comes with feet, but they're interchangeable between these two machines. They have suction cups that will hold one to the table pretty well. Haven't had any problem with it. You also can buy from Harbor Freight an adjustable workbench for under $20. and that will hold the machine if you don't want to use the feet. I found that to be pretty useful. So you can see as you go along here, the yarn, it's variegated. Depending upon where you start, you can make some very interesting designs. This is coming out sort of as a stripe. Okay, so I'm at the point now where I can cut the yarn. I'm going to switch colors now. So I'll cut the yarn and put it to the inside. And here I'm going to take the khaki color after I find the end. And I'll put that in to the feeder. And I'm just holding it taut so that when I crank, the needle will go down and on it. And once I get past a needle, I'll go ahead and tie it temporarily. When I get down about 3 or 4 rows later on, I'll tie the knot and then cut it maybe about 1.5 inches. So you find, the first, time you do this, it might feel a little awkward at first, but after you make a few of these hats, they go pretty fast. Generally, I can get one done in as far as the cranking part, about 30-40 minutes. Doesn't take long. And here I finished up the second color. So I'm measuring around sort of to get an idea of how much I want to have so that I can sew. Because now I'm going to cast off, and so I'm going to thread this yarn on a yarn needle and pick up all the stitches going around. Change the angle a little bit so you could see better. So I'm going to crank it around until the needle goes down completely and I can pick up the loop. It's something you want to be careful with. You don't want to drop a stitch at this point, but if you do, you can use a crochet hook. So I'll go through. The first couple are pretty tight. I get about 3 or 4 on the needle and pull it through, and then I find it's much easier because the needles, the yarn is, or the work is pulled away from the needles. So I keep going around. Gets a little bit easier as you go. You can use waste yarn, and if you do that, that's pretty easy. You can cut the waste yarn, and then if you crank around, it'll come completely off. But then you'll still have to pick up the loops off of the waste yarn. I find this to work out pretty well for these hats. I don't really need to use waste yarn because I'll put later on I'll show you how I sew both of these ends together to cinch them up for the hat. probably made so far probably 15 hats. It's been a great machine, no problems. As I say, the yarn that you use makes a lot of difference. They pretty much call for anywhere between a 3 and a 4 on the yarn weight, which would be DK or worsted. And Caron Simply Soft is a fairly light worsted, so it works very well. And also the texture of the yarn makes a difference too. I find that if it's a yarn that isn't as soft or have the same type of slip that Caron has, it is not as smooth running. So I found this yarn I've used quite a bit. I've used Red Heart Unforgettable, which is very pretty, a pretty yarn. I use that. I'll put some pictures at the end of the video of some of the other hats that I've made. And you can also catch me on Instagram. I post just about everything that I make there. I'm not selling these hats at this point in time. Maybe later down the road I might do it in retirement. But right now I just use them for gifts, and they made wonderful Christmas gifts. Everybody loved them. Now with the 40 machine, 40 needle machine, you can make baby hats. I just ordered a 22 needle machine because I'd like to make coffee cozies. I think that would be a fun small gift to give to people. Here I'm working around. I'm almost finished at this point. A little slow going. I did speed the film up a little bit. There's also the Addy machines. They're very nice machines made in Germany. I've found that this machine suits my needs. If it breaks down, I might buy an Addy. The largest Addy is 46 needles. So I think that this will make a slightly larger hat because it's 48. Okay, at this point, it's completely cast off, and you see it's a long tube. So I'm going to take the one end, which is going to be the inside of the hat, and I'll bring it through. The inside of the hat to meet up with the top of the hat on the outside, the one that's going to show on the outside. Now be sure to bring that yarn from the bottom through as well. So here's the point where you have an option. You could cinch these up separately and then sew them together. What I'm doing here is I'm going to sew them together. There's loops that you will see that go around the yarn that runs, that's coming out. So I'm going to take the yarn that's on the outside part of the work, and I'm going to sew in the direction. You can see here that's the direction I'm going to be sewing to the left, the way the yarn runs. And so I'll pick up the first loop on the inside, and then I'll pick up the corresponding loop, the next loop facing me. And I'll keep going back and forth this way. A little bit later I'll show you a close-up of those loops so you can see where they are. It's not as easy to see right here in this shot. Here we are. And you can see a little bit better. There's the loop, and you can see where the yarn is running through. And then there's the loop there. And it's the loop that you want to pick up. And you'll see it when you work with this. You'll see what needs to be done. See here, I'll speed up a bit and run through. Put it all together. Doesn't take long. I actually find this relaxing. Okay. So now I have the strings, and normally you can just pull the two strings. You have one yarn that's, for each side of this. Unfortunately, in this demonstration, they didn't pull through as easily as they always, usually do. So I had to pull them separately, which wasn't a problem. As you see, I'll end up tying them, and they'll be fine. But ordinarily, you just have your two strings that you can just pull independently, and you want to hold the yarn, hold the work this way, the way I'm stretching it right now. You want to hold that to try to get everything so that it's fairly flat, that you can pull. Usually goes a lot easier than this. There we go. Tighten that up. So I'm making a decision at this point that I'm just going to go ahead with the 4 strings at the end. It really isn't a problem. And I know I'm going to attach a pom on the top, so it will be hidden. Yeah, I'm checking to make sure that, see what it looks like on the other side. Okay. It's about as tight as I'm going to get it, so I'm just going to snip it off now. And I have 2 strings that are fairly close to each other, so I can tie knots. I usually do about 2 or 3 knots, make it secure. And then I have 2 left, and I want to get that other strand a little bit closer to the one that I want to tie it to. That's what I'm doing here. I'll just go underneath the stitches and bring it up. There we go. Now I'll just tie that together there. Oh, it's closed up pretty well. So what I'll do now is thread the needle, and then I'll go in through the work just on the top layer, in between, being careful not to go through the inside layer. There we are. Here I'm checking, make sure that the needle didn't go. It's okay. So I'll pull it through. This is like amigurumi. You can go ahead and snip it and it'll go to the inside. There we are. Yeah, we'll do it with the other strings. Go into the very next stitch so that there's not doesn't show. As I say, it's going to be on the inside. And usually you only have the 2 strands to do this with. Just disappears. And for the last, and we'll be finished. Okay, our hat is complete, except for the palm and a tag, if we want to put a tag on it, which I usually do. I buy them off of Etsy from people that have those nice printers that cut the tags and burn in the print. And this one, you could make a slouchy hat or, put the brim up. I get these off of Amazon, and they're very nice palms there. They come with a little elastic loop. Deciding here which one to use. And it's a little too light. Let's see about this one. Well, that's the winner. You can use a blow dryer to fluff those pom-poms out, or just shake them good. I'm using Burnett's Home Deck yarn, which is basically a tube kind of a yarn, like a cord. And I find that to be better to use. You can use a cord for these rather than using yarn itself. It's more durable. So I'll cut a length off, and then I'll feed it through the loop. Use a crochet hook or needle, either way. And I'll feed it through. There are a couple ways to attach the hat. For this one, I fed it through. I used the needle and fed it through the hat itself and tied it. Another way to do it would be to use a button. Could do that. What I do, I have a piece of ultra suede, a little square of ultra suede, and I'll cut 2 slits in it. And I'll slide that on the inside through the hat and then tie it. And that makes for easy removal for when, someone wants to wash it. This, probably in retrospect, I would have done it that way for this hat, because when someone takes this off, if they don't have a yarn needle or a crochet hook to put it through, again, You know, they'll need that in order to reassemble the pom-pom to the hat. So once I feed it through there, I'm just going to tie a double bow and it'll be finished. I sometimes make my own pom-poms with the clover maker. That's fun too. Make it extra secure. Okay. Now we have a finished hat. And it's done in under an hour. Definitely under an hour. And here's another look at our finished hat. And a few others. This was fun to make with the pom-poms. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe. Have a great day.